People refer to Huel as meal replacement. I get why people say that. I don't like the term. You wouldn't say, tonight I'm going to have a pizza, or shall I replace it with a lasagna? Can products like Huel be part of a really nutritious diet? Absolutely. So we often describe Huel as the best plan B. If somebody's doing that, I would probably discourage them from having Huel. It's not for them. But most people aren't doing that. They're making otherwise unhealthful food choices. If you were someone from 800 years ago in the Middle Ages, and we had a special time machine and we brought them to these days, you wouldn't think the food system's broken at all.
Welcome to this podcast, Tomorrow's Bites. A lot of people know you as well as like the co-founder of Huel. But I would like to know, how would you describe yourself?
Okay, I'm someone who's curious in a lot of things, but very much so on nutrition and food systems. I've been working in nutrition for over 30 years as a clinical dietitian, then in the bodybuilding and fitness world, then in the food industry with Huel, and then more recently as nutrition communicator, writing, speaking, going on podcasts, social media, etc.
I am wondering, you said that you were curious about many things, but especially in nutrition and food systems. When this started, it was already like there when you were a teenager, or did it come later?
Yeah, that's a good question. That comes up a lot. I generally put my interest in nutrition down to two things. Firstly, when I was 8 years old, my mum was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. That was the first time as a kid I would heard the C word. My parents explained it to me, and she survived another 11 years. Now, that was obviously partly due to medical treatment in the National Health Service, which was the 80s, remember? So there wasn't as good as things are now. But also she changed her diet and her mindset. And she became vegetarian and did a load of other strategies as well. Some of the supplements she took are the sort of things I find quite questionable these days. But nevertheless, there was very much a focus on good food, good nutrition around the dinner table. And I was fed good food. I wasn't vegetarian, but I did have a plant-rich diet, quite varied and good quality food. The other factor was I was bullied as a kid. And I know a lot of guys are, but it affected me in quite a pronounced way. And when I was 16, I found weights, training and bodybuilding. And soon I wanted to do everything I could to get bigger muscles. That includes knowledge. Knowledge is power, right? So why not go to uni and study this thing called nutrition? Now, I did economics at A level. In the UK, we have sort of advanced level. I did economics in it. But the rational thing at that time would have been to go and study economics. But I followed my passion, did nutrition. Turned out it probably was the right thing as well. And I've just been more curious. I've always been, since I started nutrition, I've become a bit of a science nerd, like reading anything to do with any type of science, but obviously primarily nutrition. So it's kind of followed that trajectory, really.
Yeah, so to understand it correctly, in the beginning, then what were the next steps that you took after after your studying, basically? Did you dive into directly in product development jobs, or what?
I went to work. The first thing I did was worked in the NHS, National Health Service, as a clinical dietitian. Did that for 7 years. That's the natural route that most people, especially in my day, who did a nutrition and dietetics degree, and the way they went. I always kind of knew in the back of my head this was a temporary thing. I wanted to do my own thing in nutrition. I was very fortunate that I had a good boss, and I went part-time in the latter years of 7 years in the NHS. And in the latter years, I managed to set up my own sort of practice where I see people face to face. And also I set up, as I transitioned to the next stage of my career, I set up a website called muscletalk.co.uk, which was a platform, a bodybuilding and fitness platform. This was before social media was a thing, and we had forums. This was in 2000. And then me being a nutrition consultant sort of overlapped a lot with Muscle Talk, that in 2002, I quit the NHS, just did those two things. Muscle Talk sort of veered into doing other things in the bodybuilding world, like show promotion, strongman and bodybuilding. I tried a couple of other ventures like a clothing company and supplements and things like that. But I was always consulting, and my nutrition consulting would involve face-to-face advice, online dietary advice, speaking, writing, or meal plans for care homes, more validating so the owners of care homes wouldn't get into trouble for giving poor nutrition. But it never really took off. It was always a supplementary income. It was the bodybuilding side that was my bread and butter. And then through my consultancy in 2014, I got an email from Julian Hearn, who's the principal founder of Huel, and wanted me to come up with a formula. I did. And a year later, we launched with Julian as the founder and me as co-founder. And we launched in June 2015, and the business has grown since then.
You say the other co-founder came to you. How did that precise look like? Like he just saw your profile somewhere?
Apparently, yeah. Because he saw the work I'd done in the bodybuilding fitness world. He found my website. I think he looked for a new UK nutritionist. I think he also spoke to a couple of others. I don't know what the outcome, why I was the lucky one. Commissioned me to do a bit of work. I did it. He liked it. I did a few more bits of work over that year. And then it was when we launched a year later that he asked me to be his co-founder.
I'm just wondering, from your early beginnings, when you started like doing maybe more nutrition face to face with customers, is there anything there that struck you in the way that changed your vision about nutrition? I mean, we did a master's in health food innovation. We've been close to people that's been involved in nutrition, working as nutritionists. I've heard, for example, stories of people that was really frustrated at first as nutritionists because they were talking with people that clearly was obese, and then when they asked for the reports of what they eating, like they said like, yeah, I ate this, and when seeing the reports, they were saying like, yeah, I know that he's not telling me the truth, but I don't know how to communicate with him in order for him to tell me, like, maybe because he's not considering all the stuff that he's eating and he's just putting what is going for lunch, for dinner, and not all the snacks in the middle or something like that. That how to communicate with them in order to get the best outcome for the customer, the client in this case.
Yeah, that's part of doing the job. And when I was in the health service, originally, a lot of people were coming for advice because they were told to by their doctor they needed nutrition advice. So quite often their motivation to change is quite low. They're told by their doctor to come because they've got these health markers that aren't favorable, but it's not very tangible. It's not very helpful. Sure, we had a few people that we helped, and they were usually the ones that asked their doctor to see us. But then when I went private, you're getting people paying money. Now, that's the people who are probably lower income who were paying me were quite motivated. They paid because they felt they really needed it. But a lot of people who paid were quite wealthy. And I think they just like the idea of having a nutritionist giving them a meal plan. But when you do the meal plan, it's more than just presenting a meal plan and a couple of targets. It's as much of a psychological sort of motivational, educational piece as well, because we know that if you give people too much to do in one go, they're just not going to do it. You need to do one or two goals and build on them, make goals become habits. And this is probably things I perhaps didn't do as good as I could have done when I was consulting, because I didn't really have that sort of training. It's more recently when I've read more about, because like I said, I'm curious. That curiosity goes into other areas of science, including sort of behavioral psychology, anthropology, etc. Now, I'm not an expert in these, but I think you have to have an underlying background of those skills in order to be a good nutritionist.
Then I was wondering, when you started with developing product for Huel, there were learnings about how people understood nutrition that made you think how the product needed to be in some way, because maybe you already had an understanding of, okay, people consume this way and this way. Maybe then in order to give like the best performing product, we needed to design it in this way.
Yes. I mean, initially we had the white powder product, the white pouch, with a macronutritional ratio of 40% carb, 30% protein, 30% of fat. That's percentage of energy, not absolute. And that's what we felt people wanted, because it was high protein, it was moderately high carb, and had all the essential fats, as well as all the vitamins and minerals and fiber, of course. And that was great for a few years. But back then I was saying, Huel is brilliant. It ticks a load of boxes, but its one limitation was it was what it was. There was no flexibility. So then when we brought out the black edition powder, that was a different macro ratio. It didn't just give people 2 options. It gave people several options because they could mix 1 scoop of each. Then more recently, probably about 3 years ago, we brought out the complete protein, which is fundamentally a protein product, but it's got all the vitamins and minerals, fiber, omega-3s, etc. as well. And it's really low carbs. So then, I mean, for instance, what I did for lunch today, I had 1 scoop of black edition and 1 scoop of complete protein. So I had another variety. So I think it's a case of providing different options for people. Then, of course, now we've got the ready to drinks, the bottles that most people are familiar with, available in stores. Across the UK, there's loads, and in some European stores as well. And we've got the hot and savoury and the noodle pots, which are, you add hot water, stir with a spoon, leave for a bit, and then enjoy. And they're nutritionally complete as well. And they're either grain-based, pasta-based, or noodle-based. So I think we've got a lot of concepts now that people can relate to. And this has grown because I don't come from a product developing role. I'd done 1 product before Huel, and that was a pre-workout. And it was a really good product, even if I say so myself. But nobody bought it because I'm not a marketing guy and I haven't got a commercial head. I work with people in the business who do all these things.
But then what do you think was missing? Because marketing involves a lot of things. I mean, you are now doing as well marketing as personal branding in that sense.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and that's because I've learned. I've been working 10 years with really good marketers and people with commercial sense. I'm very much a scientist in way I think. And that quite often doesn't work well with marketing because science is all about truth and some marketing. You're within the realms of being honest. You've got to push the boundaries a bit to get people to look at things.
You have to generate a feeling, right? And explain feeling to me in terms of, like in
Yes.
in logical way. It's hard to do.
Stories. And this is where I become, I mean, if we want fast forward now to more modern times, I've written a book, I've written articles. I'm probably quite a good writer, but I'm not an academic. I don't do research. I don't come from the uni, but I work with a lot of academics and I can think like an academic. So what this gives me is the privilege of not being an expert. And that's a privilege. Let me explain. There's no such thing as an expert in nutrition because it's such a huge topic, but you can be an expert in fairly narrow part of nutrition. For example, there are experts in energy and metabolism, experts in vitamin C, experts in food craving, experts in nutrition in agriculture. I could go on all day, but my skill is not being an expert in any one of them, but being knowledgeable in a huge range so I can tie up and talk to the right sort of people. This allows me to know who to speak to when I've got some ideas or where to look when I've got ideas and to understand what they're talking about. So I can then relay it, like you've just said, in a way that's a bit of a story, something that people can relate to, because science can be boring, let's be honest. Reading research papers is hard work. Reading articles can be a lot of fun because articles are written by people who know how to translate the research. So that's where I'm trying to sit. And the self-marketing, yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to do it. You probably read my LinkedIn post, which may have been why you reached out. I am working with someone who's helping me write those posts because otherwise mine might be a little bit cold. And I'm have to keep putting him on a lead because there'd be a lot more bullshit in there if I let him.
Yeah, I can understand.
I am wondering, okay, like going back a little bit to the start of Huel. If I understand well, the first products were mainly like protein powder, no pouches?
Like carbs, protein, fats in a certain ratio, right?
Okay.
And in minerals and vitamins.
Yeah, all the products since day one have all been complete food. People refer to Huel as a meal replacement. I get why people say that. I don't like the term because you wouldn't say tonight I'm going to have a pizza, or shall I replace it with a lasagna? You would say I have a pizza or a lasagna or Huel.
I think your competitors say that, right? Like you have people in the space that probably their messaging is like this.
Yeah, and I get it because people relate to it and people refer to us as a meal replacement. That's okay if that's what for people, but I don't think it needs to be that way. We're a food. We're a food in powdered form, liquid form, or bar form or in the hot and savory form. Yeah, and the protein powder came later on.
Okay.
It was the powdered food.
Then I understand that your co-founder maybe comes with this idea. I want to do like this meal, like these full, complete nutritional meals. What was the challenges that you faced at the beginning when you were trying to develop such a product?
It was firstly getting someone to take us seriously, right? I came from the bodybuilding world. I knew a lot of supplement blending companies that can blend different ingredients, but ours was quite complex, right? They're used to doing protein powders or carb powders, even weight gainers, but we've got loads of different ingredients. We've got six main ingredients: brown rice protein, pea protein, the 2 fat powders, oats, flaxseed. We've also got the vitamin and mineral blend, and then of course the flavors. So it's quite complicated. And obviously it's very cool and trendy to work in the bodybuilding supplement industry. Everyone wants to do it. Why wouldn't you? But then, so you get a lot of fly by night companies contacting these blending companies who think they've got the new thing, and it isn't. So I get why people didn't want to take us seriously. But eventually we found one company who did take us seriously in Devon in the UK. And up until very recently, we were working with them. We've just outgrown them now. They were brilliant for so many years. So that was the biggest challenge, was getting someone to actually do it for us. Then, of course, as we grew, because, you know, they controlled our ingredients to begin with, but as we grew, we wanted to control our ingredients and control our whole supply chain. There comes a load of other complexities because we're a plant-based vegan product. And we've got a lot of high, strong ethical credentials. Well, we need to make sure that we're actually, what we say, we can back up. So we've got a really robust supply chain as we can be. And that's in all angles, because we need to have sustainable ingredients, but sustainable ingredients doesn't just mean they've got low environmental credentials. It means that the companies who provide them are doing the right thing, and they're not going to go bust, because if they can't supply the ingredient, that's not sustainable. So we have to think of the word sustainability in the broadest sense. Are the companies doing well financially and that we partner with? And then, of course, there's all other issues of human rights. Are any people down the whole supply chain being exploited? Now, it's very easy to look at the supply chain with products like oat flour. It's oats that are blended, sold. Easy. Then you've got the next stage, like your pea protein, which are the protein extracted from the peas, put through a process, and then sold. Slightly more difficult, but still relatively easy. And you've got your compound ingredients, like the vitamins and mineral blends, where you've got several different vitamins. Some of those are on a carrier, and you've got a carrier itself. You have to, and so you've got your supplier of that product buying from a supplier of each particular vitamin, who are buying ingredients from elsewhere. Where are the farmers growing that? So you've got all those stages in the supply chain. That's very difficult. So there's a lot of complexity in the supply chain, but it's something we do really well. We've been complimented on that. Be transparent. I mean, I've been looking in the sustainability space only since I've been doing Huel. So I've got a reasonable idea of what good looks like, and I think we're doing it, but that's not my main area. I'm only know it's good for what people have told. But I think one key thing, guys, is to be transparent. Be as transparent as you can be about what you're doing. And if you're doing it well, it's a positive, isn't it? Because you can actually use that in your marketing.
Indeed. I am just wondering, was this whole plant-based concept already from the start when you started with designing for Huel, or was it something that came later?
It came from when Julian commissioned me to do the original formula. I gave him 2 recipes, one based on whey and one based on the brown rice protein and the pea protein. And we had a conversation, and I said, well, and this was the time as well when the whey prices were going up and there were supply issues. But we also sort of took the logical step. And this was 10, 11 years ago, right? When plant-based wasn't spoken about as much.
Exactly. That's why I was curious.
Yeah. So we actually, it wasn't only done out of doing the right thing. It was done out of kind of if we can produce a product that's as good nutritionally and opens us up to another market like vegans, then why wouldn't we do this thing? And also that whey was pretty expensive.
The thing, James, you mentioned that one of the big challenges, and I don't know how much you're involved in that part, but is eventually like the scaling part that comes with a lot of like challenges with product development. How did you overcome that? It's like this transparency on the end is of course one of those things that you be transparent in and that you can sell that, send that message out. But in the operational part, there's a lot of challenges to overcome.
Yeah. So we have to, scaling is always a challenge. So we had the co-packer in Devon. When we went to America, we obviously needed co-packers there. And when we brought the ready to drink out, that's a whole different technology. That's a different partner.
Yeah.
And that was a real trouble. We were around the world, literally around the world, looking for people for that because we were too small then for anyone to take us seriously. So how do you get to start? You're selling an idea, and why should people take us seriously? So we've actually found someone who had spare line capacity on a vegan product and they need to use it. And then we scaled that and then we grew and then we grew again. And now we've got people wanting to work with us. So that was a challenge. More recently, the end of sort of last year, and we're still not full capacity. We've got our own facility in Milton Keynes in the middle of the UK. That for doing the powders and the hot and savoury range. And so we're still not at full capacity there. So we're still working with other blenders. And that's just for UK and Europe, by the way. It's not for the American. We're still made over there. So we've now got our own facility and scaling that still. We've got the latest new, I've seen the machinery and I don't know anything about machinery. It looks really cool. I can say I enjoy watching it. That's all I know about it. And we're trying to be super slick, but we're still learning. And I think there's a few challenges on how we can get up to capacity, but we're nearly there. And when we do, obviously means we can grow more, but also we can be more profitable because we're doing it ourselves.
Yeah. But that is of course the thing, but then you're also the one that has to hire all the people, right? And the hiring part becomes one of the hurdles, I think. Now I get it.
I'm wondering, how many products are now in the portfolio of Huel, would you say? Do you know more or less?
I'd have to stop and count them. I'll give you a few minutes, but we've got the two main powders. We've got the protein. We've got two ranges of ready to drinks, the white ones and the black bottles. We've got the greens. We've got the cans. We've got the bars. And I feel like I'm missing something out here. Oh, the hot and savoury in the pouches and in the pots. But then there's multiple flavors in each, and sometimes the versions are different. Like the white bottles, there's a version 1 and a version 2 that's slightly different recipes as well as different flavors.
I was wondering one thing, like, because on selecting categories or like selecting products, there's something very valuable, I think, to ask for. Because in those initial days, how did you select to which product you have to go forward to and to add into the category? Like actually the second product was then the drinks, right? Or the shakes?
Yeah, it was. So the white powder was first, the white pouch powder. We just they evolved. We didn't have a plan of everything. We thought, so it's a good idea. How can we do it? The quickest we got to market from concept to warehouse was the complete protein. Julian had this idea and he said to me, he came up with the idea and said, how can we do this, James? And I took it away and I found a way of doing it because protein powder, you wouldn't think of it as complete nutrition because it's protein. It's one nutrient, right? So I found a way that we can, provide a product that's 70% protein, but it's got all the vitamins and minerals, essential fats, a little bit of fiber. Yeah. And everything we need.
I was wondering then, what is the product within your portfolio that you're most proud that went from a research and from a product development perspective in your case, like that you said, oh, I'm so happy that this ended up being something?
What a good question. There's a few. So the most recent addition to our range was the Black Edition Ready to Drink. I'm really pleased with that because getting 35 grams of plant-based protein into a bottle like that, that's a challenge. There's no other that I'm aware of in the world doing that.
Why is so much of a challenge?
Because plant proteins, so whey protein is soluble. Okay. Yeah. It dissolves in water. Plant proteins aren't soluble. They could be very fine particles, but they're suspended. You get fine particles suspended. You need other things in there that help keep the formula. So, and it can be quite challenging to blend that through the process. And 35 was really, the most we could get to. We've got, but we've done it and we've made a really good, nice tasting product that people are going to have. So I'm pleased because we fixed an issue that other people have challenged with. As a nutritional profile product is possibly the Black Edition powder because we've got something there that ticks a lot of boxes with people, easy to make. I'm proud of quite a few things, really. Like I've mentioned, the complete protein. I'm proud of the fact that we made a protein that's nutritionally complete, and we did it in 5 months, which was.
So how did that process then look like?
So Julian would come to me with an idea. I'd say, yeah, this is what it would look like. I'd do something on spreadsheet. I'd give it to the product development team. They would make it taste nice, but mess up my nutrition. I would then mess up their taste nice thing, but make the nutrition better. They go back and mess up my bit up until we, imagine a ball when you bounce in, it slowly comes to a stop. When it comes to a stop, we've got excellent nutrition and excellent taste. And that's kind of what we do by challenging each other. And it's a team process. Then, of course, you've got the technical team as well, telling us what's going to work technically. And you've got the marketing team who want to talk about certain claims, legally, of course, because the rules are quite strict, especially in Europe. So we've got a lot of teams coming together, and it can be quite frustrating. And then, of course, you've got to make the thing and get it to market, and you've got deadlines. If you've got the retail team, for instance, that have promised a potential retailer or a big supermarket that we're going to have a new product by a certain date, you've got to meet that date.
Yeah. And then, of course, like nutrition profile, you can create it beforehand and select the best protein powders and ingredients, etc., that you put into it. But then I'm wondering, how good is like a powder mix in delivering the nutrients eventually? Because actually, we also know as a scientist, it's all about the matrix in the end, right? Delivering.
It isn't, amongst other things. I mean, the matrix, that's a word that's been thrown around a lot lately with the ultra-processed food debate. What's a good matrix? What's not a good matrix? Nobody knows. Nobody's come up with that. We know that there are certain perceptions that come from chewing food, but appetite and satiety are hugely complex issues that involve physical processes. They involve neurotransmitters, hormones, psychological processes, cultural feelings, how we feel of it. So you can make something nutritionally strong, and there is no perfect food. We know that they break down, the powders are easier to digest in some respects, but that's to do with the macronutrition. So do you know what I mean by the term caloric availability? Are you familiar with that term? So if anybody doesn't know, if you were to have 100 calories worth of sugar, roughly 99 of those calories would be absorbed and utilized within the body. If you were to have 100 calories worth of protein, depending on the source and the form it's in, maybe only as few as 70 of those calories will go on to be utilized by the body. Now that's whatever form it is. Okay, it will vary a bit. And then you've got fiber as well, which slows down the whole digestion process, especially insoluble fiber. And then, of course, you've got soluble fiber, which has a caloric value itself because the microbiome will break it down and convert it into short-chain fatty acids, which themselves can go on and tell your brain to feel full. So it's the matrix of a food is just one aspect. Now, there does seem to be something in certain so-called ultra-processed foods that the very matrix and the way they are softer is affecting the hyperpalatability of these junk foods. But we've designed Huel to be satiating. In fact, we've done a research trial. It's under peer review at the moment. It'll be out any week now about Huel and satiety. Now, obviously, I can't reveal the results, but I can say, we've looked at objective biomarkers and subjective feelings, because you can measure satiety by certain hormones, but ultimately it's a subjective thing, isn't it? If you have a meal and you say, I'm stuffed, I'm full, I couldn't eat anything else, that's an individual thing.
Certain hormones, we talk about GLP-1 as one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everyone's talking about GLP-1 at the moment.
Yeah,
the GLP-1 agonists, and it's an interesting area, along with PYY and CCK and ghrelin. They're all affecting how full we feel and how hungry we feel.
I am curious about what you were mentioning about caloric availability. What are we talking exactly when we say caloric? Because in the end, for example, we can talk about calories in the way that we use it in order to create energy in our body. Proteins, for example, most of them, in theory, they are going to perform physiological activities in our body, but very few of them are going to go in order to create energy, in order to build structures, to do processes as enzymes, etc., etc. So in that sense, what does the caloric availability means? It's like how much of this nutrient we can use in order to create energy ourselves, or what would be like in that case the definition?
Yeah, that's a good challenge. So protein does all those things first, but ultimately energy balance in your body is controlled dominantly by insulin. It's controlled by several hormones, but the insulin's all in one here. And if your blood glucose level isn't where it should be, it will take things from all tissues, including muscles, and then later your immune system and things like that. So protein is used structurally for all those things you've mentioned and more. But ultimately, it will be broken down. The nitrogen part and the carbon part will be separated, and it'll be used for energy. That's why it has a caloric value. Now, we use as a rule of thumb, you probably know this, use 4 calories per gram for protein. It's actually way more complicated than that. Some amino acids are higher, some are smaller, certain conditions. So most of the amino acids are glucogenic, so they convert to glucose, but not all of them. Leucine, and now you're going to test me, lysine, I think, are ketogenic. They don't convert to glucose. And there's a couple of others, and I'm not going to name them because I can't remember them. They're both glucogenic and ketogenic. So under certain circumstances, they convert to a different fuel. So this is where it gets complicated. Plus, each one has a different caloric value. The 4 calories is a rough estimate, depend on what a typical protein intake would be. But that would vary if you have dairy proteins because they go through a different process. So I'm just illustrating when you see the calories on there on a pack, they're actually not that reliable. Now we can talk about carbohydrates as well. And obviously fiber are technically a polysaccharide, a carbohydrate, but we can only metabolize two forms of starch, which is,
yes,
to be honest,
I know what you mean exactly. Yes.
yeah. So we're not rabbits who can consume, or cows who can do other forms. So they have a different calorie value. And then of course there's the sugars and there's the monosaccharides and the disaccharides all have a different calorie value. Fats, the actual figure for 9 calories per gram of fat is actually fairly reliable for long chain triglycerides. But then you've got medium chain triglycerides like coconut oil, for instance, as 8.3 calories per gram, roughly. But it is actually a pretty good estimate in human diets when it comes to fats. And then fiber, it depends whether it's soluble or insoluble. We take a rule of thumb of 2 grams for fibers, but that is quite rough. So that's even as we measure it. And then they've got the caloric availability issue, which I've just roughly outlined. So yeah, it is what goes on to be used for energy after everything else is taken care of. And, there's a whole article on this, by the way, that people can read for free on my Substack, Thought for Food. Well, it's 2 articles, one on the Atwater, which is the process of calorie counting. And there's another one on the caloric availability side of things. So if people have got a spare 20 minutes, they can read those articles.
No. I mean, I think it's important to, it's that you share this information. It's just like, in the end, for me, I'm not an expert in nutrition, but it's true that the conversation about calories is always, it has always been like, for me, I don't know, a little bit of a trickster, no? Like understand for example, when we talk about carbohydrates, that we talk about calories, because that is when our body in some way is making more use of them. But if we talk about calories for every single nutrient, no, in the end, it's not practical because, for example, for what I remember from my studies and as far as I understand, measure protein by calorie is not as important as measure protein by amount, for example. No?
Yeah, I take your point, and you're right. And I'm not a huge fan of calorie counting, but some people find calorie counting as a strategy to help them control their weight really useful.
Yeah, and it's useful. In that sense, it's useful.
I don't advocate it. I don't not advocate it because some people, it clearly works for them, and who am I to tell them otherwise? But because of the nuance within it, I'm not always a huge fan, but I get it. And it's important not to be too reductionistic with the way we view foods as well. I know with Huel, it is about nutrients, and people do have 100% Huel, but I actually want to encourage people to have Huel as part of their diet as it suits them. And we have people that have maybe 2 meals a day with Huel. Brilliant. We have people that maybe have Huel for 2 meals a week because they're busy. Perfect. That's what we want people to have it to what suits them.
Yeah, I get it. But is it really perfect in the end? It is. is this the perfect solution? Because we were talking previously around the part of like what is healthy food, and we know basically more or less what is healthy food. It goes more to the whole foods part, and it will be mostly plants and a bit less meat than we consume currently.
Well, I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect food. The food, human beings are complex. In fact, if anyone was to read my book, I want one take. If people come away with just one take, I hope they come away with a lot of takeaways, but if they come away with one thing, I want them to appreciate that humans and the food system is complex. If people just grasp that one point, they will open themselves up to being able to acknowledge so much more and learn so much more. Now, if we're just talking about individual nutrition here, there is no such thing as a perfect food. We are influenced by so many things. For example, culture. Well, the food culture. This is crucial because how we feel when we have certain foods will depend on what maybe we were brought up with, as well as our genes, as well as what we see other people, as well as what we're influenced later in life. And how we feel is the result of what's manifesting in our physiologies, in our neurology, in our endocrine system. So we can't ignore that. There's no such thing as a perfect diet. In fact, I have a whole section in opening one of the chapters in my book on saying, I don't know what an ideal diet is. And if people want to get their money back on the book, feel free, because I'm okay with that, because there is nothing. Now, can products like Huel be part of a really nutritious diet? Absolutely. But they don't have to be. Some people, Huel isn't for them. In fact, if you're the sort of person that has the time to grow some of your own food or buy it from places where you can, the supply chain, and you buy nutritious stuff, you have the time and the money to prepare it. You're not busy and you can do it. You can share it with your family every day for 3 meals a day. Then Huel's probably not for you. Now back in the real world, how many people do that? So we often describe Huel as the best plan B for people who don't have the time to do that sort of thing. If somebody's doing that, I would probably discourage them from having Huel. It's not for them. But most people aren't doing that. They're making otherwise unhealthful food choices when they're strapped for time, maybe spending too much money. And they're also, and we haven't spoken much about the environmental impact, of course. We know that meat-rich diets have a very negative for the environment. So if people care about this side of thing too, Huel could be part of the solution as well as other food choices. And I think it's important to, in fact, one of the points I try and make in the book is that, so we come from the West, Netherlands and the UK. We're very much an individualistic culture. We're very libertarian. We're quite me-centric. We think about the me before the we. Activist cultures over there in the East, they tend to be a lot more we focused. Now, I'm glad I've grown up in the West in an individualist culture. I don't want to change that. There's standards of living are typically higher. However, can we be a little bit less me focused and a little bit more we focused, especially when it comes to our food choices? Because we can be. What we eat, our food choices primarily affect us, of course, but they also affect others. And by others, I mean humans and non-humans and the wider environment too. And this, I think, is key. And I think if people can just accept this, I'm not a vegan. I probably never will be. I have massively reduced my meat consumption a few years ago, which was part of the impetus for writing the book. I have about 10% of my calories come from animals. For a perspective, the Western average is typically 28 to 30%. So that's around about 2/3 less. I think it would be great if more and more people were doing that. However, it has to be sustainable. And we speak about sustainability a lot here, don't we? And a quote I use in the book is, a diet isn't sustainable if it can't sustain an individual. If we're eating too strict a plant-based diet, and I have come across people that have done this, how are they going to be in a position to be healthy themselves to look after other people? And I've heard people who've been vegan and they've gone back to eating maybe eggs a couple of times a week, maybe a tiny bit of meat now and again, because they've just felt really rubbish. It's helped them feel better. Who am I to challenge that? Well, and we have to take this into account. And where we are with technology, I mean, I think there is a fix. And if someone wants to be completely plant-based or vegan, I will be cheering them on the sidelines on that. Absolutely. Because I think it's a great thing to do. But you have to pay a little bit more attention to what your food choice is there. And we've hopefully can be useful for people in that respect.
I want to start a little monologue, but it will end up in a question.
Okay.
I think that the matter with the perfect diet is that there is no perfect diet just because it depends on context. It's just like if we were like bringing to a really different topic, is we were talking about what is the perfect way of playing football, for example. There's not a perfect way of playing football. There's a way that works for the context. Same happens with diets, and since we are not all the same human, there's not the chance. Then this is something that I've been thinking a lot about nutrition, and I think I'm really happy that I can talk with you about it, James. There is definitely a nutrition focused tendency to look into the way we feed. Like there is the people that looks into the macros. There is like every time we tend to see more our food as a bunch of nutrients together than as the whole thing. And I came to the conclusion that since we do not have the information yet that is necessary to understand how well the food will perform in our bodies, in the sense of, and there is technology like the personalized nutrition that it will give us great insights on how everybody needs to be fed in the correct doses and parameters. But since till we're not there yet, I see this effort of looking into the nutrients. So like this obsession for the nutrients a little bit. Yeah, okay, like you can fine tune a little, but it's not going to change your life. It's more like you, in this moment, it is much better than you think about the categories, like how much grains are you including in your diet? How much vegetables? How much meat is it like is performing in it's just being part of your diet? Because I believe that right now, all that fine tuning is a little bit senseless because I don't think we have yet the information to say, yeah, I need exactly X amount of carbohydrates, X amount of because you don't know yet your body to that depth of level. What do you think about this tendency in the nutrition and about this whole statement?
I pretty much agree with everything you said there. And these sort of thoughts have been going on in my own head, but I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to say I don't think we ever will. Now, I'm a big data fan. I love data. You can't get enough data.
You're a scientist, no? Like,
yeah. You have to respect the limitations of data. How do you interpret it? What is it telling us, right?
Indeed.
We're complex beings, right? And I want the more and more people to do these testing and put their data out there publicly and learn from it. And we will get closer and closer to knowing more. But it's always going to have limitations because I think you just said it's context. I love your phrase. A few moments ago, you said it's context specific or something like that.
Yeah, like the perfection is only like something's only perfect depending on the context. And there are things that are perfect because the context never changes. And there are things that they will never be perfect. And it happens with football. It happens with economics. It happens with everything will only be perfect in the context where it is placed.
And I'm going to steal that for future podcasts.
Just put me in the acknowledgements.
I love that. I love the phrasing you've used there because it's so right because context specific, right? And even if this is why I don't think we're ever going to get there because we don't do the same things every day. If we got up, we were in the same health, we walked exactly the same number of footsteps every day. We thought exactly the same thoughts. We got stressed on exactly the same amount. We were influenced by exactly the same by different people every day. Well, we'd be robots, right? That's never going to happen.
Exactly.
We're never going to happen. We will get infections. We will have other disease states. We might trip over our knee. We will go to the gym. We will walk different steps every day. We might walk downstairs and forgotten something, go back upstairs to get it. We've already messed up. We're already not the same. So it doesn't mean we can't work towards what this perfection is. And it's a phrase I like about describing science. I don't know who came up with it. It might have even been me. Right. But science is the continual pursuit of the truth while being content that we'll never find it. And you can substitute the word truth for perfection or perfect for the context of this conversation. We can constantly strive to be perfect, but we've got to be comfortable we'll never get there. In fact, in my book's more about is as much about individual nutrition as it is about the food system as a whole. And in the first chapter, I actually try to define the perfect food system, but knowing that we'll never get to the perfect food system, but we should work towards it. And then in the final chapter, I come back to that definition. Now everybody's learned so much, and say, how can we get there? What would moving towards that look like it? And it's okay to have a mindset that goes towards that. So I love all this personalized nutrition, but I'm very cautious of it. I'm really on the fence about it. I want everyone to carry on doing it, but I don't know how it's going to work. I'm still getting my head around it, and I'm open to other people's ideas because it's going to influence how I think.
I think that when it comes to special nutrition, in the end, personalized nutrition, in the end, it will just be a matter of seeing the moment. I think you got a really great point. Like, having a lot of data doesn't mean that we interpret it well.
Yeah.
But as we said, science or many things in general is just like constant learning, and maybe it will take generations until people spot like how this information can be well used for that. Still, I really loved something you described about individualism and community in the way that we feed. And I think that I think I repeat it every podcast, but we really strive for that because we really believe in the systemic thinking of the food system. Like there is solutions are not perfect. Solutions are only perfect in the context that the rest of the things are well connected and everything is well thought.
Trade-offs.
And since you were mentioning, I don't want to do spoiler of your book, but where does the definition for you of a good food system starts with?
Where does it?
How it looks like? How does it look a little bit? I mean, you can just read it if you want.
I'm literally looking for it in my book. Just here it is. Okay, class, let's go on. I'll read my definition, and you can see if I've covered it. A perfect food system delivers sufficient, affordable, sustainable, and nutritious food for every human, reliably ensures adequacy for the future, respects others, both humans and non-humans, causes minimal damage to the environment, acknowledges cultural diversity, and any resulting adverse consequences are fully mitigated with no unnecessary casualties. I think nobody's challenged me yet. I mean, the book's selling quite well. Nobody's challenged me on that yet. I think it covers all bases, but it's unachievable. I know that, but that's what it looks like. And we can certainly get close to it. In fact, at the moment, in some respects, we're going in the wrong direction. In fact, we mentioned the government report that says the food system is broken. You know, it's worth mentioning that, but I open the book saying the food system isn't broken. If you were someone from 12,000 years ago, or someone from 800 years ago in the Middle Ages, and we had a special time machine and we brought them to these days, you wouldn't think the food system's broken at all. You'd think it was lovely. You'd be running around dancing. I've got so much food here, and look how it tastes and everything. Is the food system doing a good job? Probably not. Sure, we've solved undernutrition. I mean, for the last year, for the fourth time in 20 years, a famine was declared in the world in southern Sudan, but that's due to war and political reasons. We have enough calories and enough protein to feed every human being, and there's a lot more of us these days, and some. In fact, we're doing such a good job of it, we're throwing a top load of it away, which is also a problem. But we've got increased risk of non-communicable diseases. We've got a strained greenhouse gas emissions and land use, etc. And we've got questionably ethical farming practices. So the food system we were going in the right direction. It's probably veered off at a tangent. How can we bring it back to going in the right direction again? That's the big question.
Then, James, if I will give you all the resources right now and you wake up tomorrow, what will be the 3 changes that you will implement directly?
Well, you put me on the spot there, haven't you? What would I do directly? I mean, do you know, that's a really tough question. I don't know if I can answer that on this. I would probably start with the social media companies, and I would have some sort of legislation that would get rid of this drive attention algorithm they've got going, because we've found out over recent years that negativity sells. Then that manifests this into the food system, into food influencers. We know that influencers that are putting out clickbait content that's based on bullshit are doing much better than research evidence-based content. So I put something in the algorithm that suppressed those thoughts and amplified good information, because the polarization in politics is being mapped onto nutrition. And nutrition has become an ideology. And don't get me wrong, there have always been food beliefs because they're based in religion, but it's going really wrong at the moment. And we need to look at a way. So I think we'd answer a lot of questions if we got that. There's one. Two, I would definitely address the issues related to things like food deserts. If you don't know what a food desert is, this is where it happens a lot in America, a little bit in London, where you haven't got readily access to nutritious food. You've got foods, you've got fast food shops and cheap takeaways that are just a short walk away, but you can't easily get nutritious food because your shopkeeper nearby doesn't want to stock it because nobody buys it because it's too expensive, so it goes off and he wastes money. I get it. So I would address the income inequality of access to the right sorts of foods, but that wouldn't just be through subsidies or taxation. It would be to a lot more.
Yeah.
Then the other thing would be, I would be doing more and more. Is that coming to me now? You see, would be the third thing. I'd be doing more and more to utilize modern food technologies. Now, this would include, which, can of worms there, but the wrong sorts of ultra-processed foods are out there at the moment, but ultra-processing in the right format can solve a lot of the problems. As well as that, I'd be looking in the direction of things like cellular agriculture, the cultured meat or the clean meat, or hate the term lab-grown meat, and the milk proteins and the plant proteins and proteins from thin air. I'd be looking at different forms of agriculture. We shouldn't be getting rid of intensive farming, but we should be controlling it and using alternative technologies like regenerative agriculture, traditional methods using modern technologies. What about the novel proteins and the novel fats? The way we can grow algae at the moment, this could solve the omega-3 problem. And algae, has a really cool attribute. It sequesters carbon. So as well as providing nutrition, protein and fats, it sequesters carbon. That's interesting, isn't it? What about GMOs, the frankenfoods that everybody hates, right? I'm not saying we should do away with, they should definitely be regulated. We do not want corporations going haywire with them, but we shouldn't be villainizing them either because they could solve insufficiency. We've got the Philippines who outlawed them last year, one of the poorest nations in the world, and what's got high level of poverty. People aren't having enough food. People will suffer because of that legislation. That legislation has come from people in the West. But if you look at the evidence, we should really be utilizing them. Then there's other technologies as well that we should be embracing, some precision fermentation. And of course, I'm going to throw complete foods like Huel in there as well. I see a combination of all these technologies as being part of the solution. So you've got misinformation, you've got income inequality to food, and you've got future technologies. There's your answer.
I mean, I can dive into this for another hour.
I think we have a problem, James, that it's like we have 1 hour of podcast. It's almost, we're reaching there. And this conversation definitely could lead into much more.
Yeah.
But since we're arriving a little bit to the end, I want to ask you that directly. What do you expect of the future in the next 5 to 10 years?
We don't know. Look, there's some interesting things happening. We just want to carry on growing the company, be more profitable, look at some more products. I want to see more in the Black Edition flavors. We've got 4 flavors out. I want 8, really. I don't know whether we'll get there, how quick we can get there. That would be really cool. And let's look at, we're working on another little project at the moment that I can't talk about, unfortunately, but there's an exciting product there that's really piqued my interest. In fact, I've been talking about it for a couple of years, and we're just starting to run with it. A lot of fun. And I, as well as Huel, I want to be doing a lot of other stuff with my other hat on, my nutrition company.
Exactly. What about you? What about?
Around pushing the book. I want to writing on my Substack where people can read my articles, which is all free. The social media thing more broadly. I might do a little bit more with my YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, but at the moment I'm just repurposing my Instagram stuff there. But I want to do, rather than doing that way, I want to do that way on film.
We get it completely. You don't know how much we can. I really understand that what you say.
Because you've got less than 90 seconds on Instagram to do something detailed.
Indeed.
On YouTube, you can go 5 or 6 minutes and you can get some good info on the same topic. And I'd like to look at that. Maybe other than that, I don't know. I just want to chill out for a bit, really. It's been quite full on with a lot of interviews lately and that stuff. So yeah, I want to write because I'm exploring a topic at the moment on my Substack that I'll probably be publishing 2 or 3 or maybe 4 articles late March and beyond on the concept of nutrition populism. where there's the political mindset of populism, which is going haywire over the world at the moment, it translates perfectly onto nutrition. And there's good reason for this. I haven't come up with a concept, but what I have is I've heard the concept and I'm running with it, and I'm going to come up with something I've got a lot more to say on there. In fact, there's a word I introduce in Well Fed called dietology, which is a link between diet and ideology. And I've got a lot more to say on this topic more broadly. It's about misinformation, but food belief. I mean, we haven't just had misinformation since social media. We've had snake oil salesmen since the late 1800s. And we've had people who've been saying fad diets and ripping people off since we've been trading with each other, which, how many thousands of years that have been. So this is nothing new. It's just social media has just amplified this massively. And you've got people like the glucose goddess, who's very questionable, but people don't see it. And why would they see it? She's telling people to eat well, right? What's wrong with that? And it's complex. I've got a lot more to say on this topic.
Oh, really interesting. I know that this is not the end of the podcast, but I had like this question back in my mind. This black, how do you call it? Black powder? Black addition?
Black addition powder and RTD.
Is that also like marketed for like in like general consumer, or is more for people? It's because I was like questioning like 35 grams of protein.
Yeah.
It's like
in the powder, in the black addition powder, it's 40 grams. In the bottle, we've got 35 grams. So that's high. So it is for the general consumer, because like I've described, protein is more satiating than the other nutrients. So it helps keep people full up for longer. That's good. So, but yes, people who are active and gym goers will really like that as well.
Yeah, okay. Because I mean, I understand if somebody like makes a lot of sport, but somebody like with moderate more, like in general, the European diets already like cover most of the protein that we need. No, in theory.
Yeah, but protein and fiber are satiating, and if people are basing their diets around protein and fiber, it might help them reduce their overall caloric intake, which might help in other aspects. And because it's nice tasting, it might help satisfy the sweet cravings as well and keep people feeling full up for longer.
Yeah. Okay. I understand the part of the satiation.
Yeah. And there's research coming on this, right?
We look at the society,
because that's why you say like it may help. And like I'm curious of like if you will consume like 3 times a day, are you fulfilled? Did it fill up, etc., or are you still snacking in between? Are you still doing other things, right?
Yeah. Well, it's subjective.
Yeah.
For instance, as a lot of women, my wife, for example, she has half a bottle of the ready to drink and she's full up. I could down one easily. Does it help get rid of my cravings? Yes.
Happens the same with my partner.
It's subjective, and we have to. So when anyone's assessing satiety, we have to look at objective markers and subjective perception.
Okay, I think that this is going to be for today. Let's go with the closing questions, if that's okay for you.
Yes, James, we fired you with questions, but now I give you the opportunity to ask a question to us.
What concerns you most about the food system?
What I concern the most?
I love this question.
Yeah, like for me, it's a bit weird that food, as we all know, it should be one of the basic things in life to drive us as humans, that it isn't the case for people in the world. You know, it's weird like that eventually happened, but that it has economical reasons, and capitalism is one of the things that helped with this. But probably also political reasons, right? That's also in that sense is one thing I speculate, like, because it's weird, right? It's weird if you cannot we have water here, we have food access, everything. Like, you need to thrive on that. So if it's not there,
I totally agree. For me, it's this connection with food. Is the fact that like people in the world tends to be every time more disconnected to where food. I mean, they enjoy a meal, but they don't think about where the food comes from. They don't think about like what is supposed to eat in a McDonald's or to cook yourself, and they don't. And I do not blame people for this. I want to make this clear, but it's something that just has happened. Like historically, we've been molded to this way, to this part. We had a guest in the podcast, and she has 2 nice books. Caroline Steele, she has a book called Zootopia, and the other how.
Read Zootopia. I read it.
Yeah, so she was in the podcast, and I really love that concept that she's putting there.
Fabulous, but really about a year ago. Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah, so for me, it's this connection.
Yeah, I get that. And people might look at Huel and think we're against that, but that's not the case. But we are where we are, right? So we need to have different things to address these problems.
Are you informing your customers, like also, and like what the products offer?
Yeah, like they think of the complementary, no? For example, you can have Huel and you can have you cook your own stuff, not like that.
We do a lot of other, even on the Huel, not my own page, but on the Huel page, we do a lot of other recipes that are not linked to Huel. Sure, we might mention it and we're branded with Huel, but we're talking about food in other ways. And I'm really proud of our website. We've got a great guides and articles section where we've got so much nutrition information. And some of the articles, we don't even mention Huel. Sure, it's on the Huel page and the website. We talk about other nutrition stuff. We want to educate people, try and empower people to make the right food choices.
Then, James, since we're talking about food, our last question to all of our guests is this one. What is your favorite food or dish?
What is my favorite food?
Yeah.
Or dish.
Look, I'm a Brit, right? Fish and chips.
Fish and chips.
Oh, okay. That's emotional connection there.
You shouldn't have them too often, but hey.
If you talk about nutrition.
It's not an ultra-processed food.
Yeah.
It's true.
Processed. So, yeah, and I realise that the cod isn't probably sustainable and people are going to criticise me, but, I don't have them every day.
Nothing is unsustainable per se. It's only unsustainable the mass production that happens around it. So it's not bad that you have fish and chips. In any case, it's bad the whole indiscriminatory fish fishing that there is. So I think that is important. Wow. So I think that's why sometimes I hate the concept of guilty-free things, because it's like things are only guilt because of things that are not related to the food. Like it's related to something. So,
one of the things I do go on about is fear-mongering food and these social media influencers that go out there and fear-monger stuff. It's not cool. It's pointless as well.
Indeed.
James, I want to say thank you for your time. A wonderful to point this side of you to the audience. We dived into different things, from product development to much more deeper questions on complete.
Those are the best conversations.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Oh, great.
And thanks for your time, James.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, guys. Great conversation.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Here.